Look forward to your participation.
Thank you.
We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I will go down the list of members alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. Mayor Beck, David Barry, Councilmember Butler.
Present.
Thank you. Doug DeCluson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Giles.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Littlefield.
Present.
Thank you. Cheryl Lombard. Councilmember Manfredi.
Present.
Thank you. Jackie Meck. Roy Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Pace. Mayor Peterson. Mark Reardon.
Present.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Stipp.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Wires.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wheatley.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Woods. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you all please now stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Our next item is call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. We normally allow 15 minutes for the call to the audience. I will be flexible today if we have more speakers than so that we would exceed that limit. There is a 3-minute limit per speaker. Okay, so I will start with the cards that we have received. Is it Marie Gillian? I'm not sure. So Larry, okay. Sorry, I couldn't make out the S.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, okay, good idea, huh? I see my mayor here. Okay, I think it's unfortunate that Governor Hobbs voted for the SB 1246, the legislative proposal to extend Prop 400. And it's sad to see mayors that make up MAG's regional council put out a hostile and aggressive statement as it was passed, saying that they are unably opposed to legislative plan. At the same time, the accused lawmakers of negotiating in bad faith and being unwilling to compromise. It sounds like MAG and Hobbs are one who were unwilling to compromise. Although Hobbs is accusing lawmakers of holding Arizona economic hostage, It is now MAG and the government who are doing so. The legislator put a plan together and they passed it. And it wasn't a very small group of lawmakers who passed it, as the mayors claimed in their letters. It was majority, 47 members. That's not a small group. It's true, it's MAG and Government Hobbs. They are the small group. The bipartisan compromise that Hobbs references in her veto isn't actually bipartisan. I'm sorry. I just got, my allergies are killing me and I'm not seeing very good. Or a compromise. It would allow that the implementation of MAG's regional transportation plan without a single change. Real compromise would have required actual changes to the plan. So that means that the legislator gave voters a real choice and it protected taxpayers. It would have provided for the future economic development of Maricopa County by prioritizing roads and freeways, not wasting our taxpayers' dollars to narrow streets, rip out lanes, construct bicycle lanes and pedestrian paths, and bring California-style mandates to Arizona that force people out of their cars. This was the best and likely only opportunity for Prop 400 extension to be on the ballot next year. The lack of support, the hostile opposition, and now the veto from the government all shows that it is really you and the government who are unwilling to compromise. And it is you're preventing the people from having a vote.
Thank you. The next speaker is Catherine Day.
Okay, Meg, Council, this is not my forte, so I'm really nervous, so I apologize first up. Okay, several things with concern me when hearing about the proposed road diet in my city. Consider Mesa, Maine, downtown is one lane with the light rail going through it and bike lanes. One main worry I have is how this will affect emergency response vehicles. Traffic is already rough during rush hour, creating difficulty for our first responders. I cannot imagine how worse it could be if lanes were narrower or whole lanes taken out. This will increase the response time of these vehicles to get to their destination and making their jobs much more difficult in the response of more loved ones dying. Unless they have to take an alternative route to go around the lanes that have been dropped down. While I understand the goal is to reduce congestion on the roads, a diet will not be the way to achieve this. Think about how hot Arizona summer gets. I personally have used public transit when my car broke down, and it took me one night from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock at night to get home. And I had to ride the whole way because on the bus system, there's 3 slots for bikes. When you get over in the McClintock area, it's full. You've got college students. So I rode all the way home in dark with the risk of being whatever. I do not prefer to drive my car on roads that have been reduced to single lanes or even double lanes. Realistically, most people cannot get to work means by biking or public transit. And another thing I would like to propose is if this is a good idea, I think that we should do a pilot with the cities, and all city employees have to use public transit to get to work every single day. Realistically, most people cannot get to work. Drivers will be frustrated and spend more time commuting. In order to alleviate the congestion and promote safety, you should throw out the idea of putting our roads on diets, add lanes, and widen them. Like they're doing over by the 24 on East Mesa. They're talking about widening the 24 because of the added traffic that's going over there because of the air port that they're increasing 273 acres to increase retail and housing and everything else. A study done in Los Angeles shows that automobile accident deaths had increased by 43% after their first year on the road diet. That statistic alone should make everyone at MAG seriously consider if a road diet is the right move. This is not an effective solution. A road diet has not promoted safety and hinders. I personally don't use air conditioning, and I've lived out here for 22 years. I never use the air conditioner in my car unless I have my dog in the car. I pass cars constantly. Everybody's running their air conditioner. If you've got people stopping at lights.
Okay, if you could, please wrap up. Your time is up.
Okay. That's all right.
Thank you. And I will remind our committee members that we are not allowed to respond to comments during the public comment period. So, okay, the next speaker is April Smith. Okay. Thank you. All right, next is Janet Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to make this statement that I think it's unfortunate that this advisory group advised the governor to veto the legislature's bill to extend Prop 400. Your plan now is to have a ballot initiative. Well, we'll probably not get what you wanted anyway. You may get nothing. Our state legislatures will continue to fund our roads and our highways as they are able, and the cities will maintain their roads, both of those things to satisfy the public preference for private vehicles. You may come to realize that at 28% for public transportation offered by the legislature is better than nothing. When it would be wise to remember that the one who has the most leverage at the negotiating table is the one who has the least to lose by walking away. Republicans in the leadership may gain more by sunsetting an unaccountable and what should have been a temporary tax. They'll go back to their districts and get standing ovations. Thank you.
Okay, the last speaker that I have a card for now is Thomas Simacek.
Dear Mr. Commissioner and the committee, I would like to make some comments. I escaped communism in my youth and immigrated legally to the US. Over there, ownership of car was made automatically rich. If you have car, you were rich. And most people were forced to public transportation with all the problems and limitations. We are all different, and it's impossible for the government to anticipate and provide for all our transportation needs. America is a great country with people allowed great freedoms, among them the freedom to move. Like in communist countries, you will have to have a permit to go to Tucson. Even the poorest here are actually own a car. As people lives improved, they mostly want to own their own house, and so cities everywhere in Europe too are spreading around. And idea of road diet by replacing cars with public transportation, biking and walking is a big step backwards, going back to like the 19th century, I guess. And Phoenix and the Valley of the Sun is the worst worst example to do this. Valley of the Sun is hugely spread. You cannot force businesses to spread on the analogous way going through the outlying areas. when I see public buses in Phoenix, they are driving around mostly empty, or there is a one or two people. So I think they are wasting fuel and resources, the driver, and it's kind of like having a private limo. Biking is for people that are a lot younger, and walking, I give up my bike a few years ago. And walking in the 115 Fahrenheit is, even for 15 minutes, is impossible for me. I would probably faint. Please stop destroying traffic lanes for useless and dangerous bike paths. Athletes have plenty of places to bike already. Going shopping on bike is really hard. In Tempe, they closed one line of the McClintock for bike line. There are no bikes, but everybody is complaining. So I have heard that about 1% of the valley residents use public transportation, and the percentage is going down. I do not think that spending a huge part of our taxes on subsidizing this 1% is a wise use of money. Thank you very much.
Okay, I did just receive another speaker card. Sebastian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I just kind of want it to be noted out that a lot of the people here look to be older, and I would like to advocate for the youth of Arizona, especially Phoenix. Sorry, I'm very nervous.
Not a problem.
Having lived in Arizona my whole life, walking, riding, driving, biking, I can tell you that one of the greatest abilities of mine one of the greatest things of Phoenix that I've seen is my ability to move. And seeing as most young Arizonans are not going to be able to afford cars and leisure and entertainment, all of these other things that we need in order to be happy and healthy and productive, the ability to use public transport cheaply and effectively is going to be one of the biggest economic strengths of Arizona. That's all that my cart can take. I'm so nervous. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. We have recently updated our process to collect comments up to 2 hours prior to the meeting. Those comments will be shared in writing and electronically with all the members of the committee and will be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. However, before this process changed, we received 9 comments online for this committee, and so those comments will be read today by MAG staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I will read the comments that we received for the TPC prior to June 9th. Other online comments have been received and are at your place and provided to members electronically. The first comment is from Larry Schofield of Mesa. Begin comment. Good morning. I recently had the opportunity to listen to the recorded meeting from 419 where you discussed the Broadway Curve project. The agenda item was very informative, but more importantly, I wanted to send kudos to MAG, ADOT, and the local communities for their hard work and efforts in coordinating the traffic signal systems so the construction has as little impact as possible. We all get frustrated anytime we drive through construction, but often forget how hard people work to make it less disruptive and safer. Thank you, and hats off to the agency folks. End comment. The next comment is from Sean Smith of the United States. I would like to know why MAG is wanting to implement outrageous policies in relation to the ozone and Vision Zero policies. Anyone with a logical mind and one grounded in facts knows that the entire picture is not being looked at. Safe systems is in actuality a cover for other ulterior motives. MAGs, let's start looking at actual facts and not be coerced with crazy policies that do nothing to support the freedoms of the residents in Maricopa County. End comment. The next comment is from Sheila Stoddard of Goodyear. Begin comment. We have seen what happens to other states that invest in mass transit. California is a great example of that. We have the freedom to drive if we want to, and it shouldn't be up to you to monitor and disallow us to drive. Further, you are destroying small businesses by diverting normal traffic. Stop the WEF garbage now. This is America. End comment. The next comment is from Susie Dion of Peoria. Begin comment. My data privacy belongs to me. A smart city has no place in the USA. This great nation was founded on freedom, and that includes freedom to move without restrictions. In the name of convenience and safety, smart cities limit the movements of cars and foot traffic. I believe this is not constitutional to allow restrictions on a republic's citizens. Apart from gathering tremendous amounts of data, these new technologies also allow for levels of control that are unheard of in previous civilizations. A former Silicon Valley engineer, Aman Jabi, is sounding the alarm that smart cities will essentially be open concentration camps. Quote, by giving them your data, this includes limiting access to your God-given rights and freedoms. You give them the ability to monitor and assess your behavior, which can now be converted into a social credit score. That score is then used to determine what privileges you qualify for and which ones you don't in the new slave society, unquote. This social credit score is already being deployed in China, and during the 2020 pandemic, many nations implemented the first steps toward this system of control. Digital IDs and digital currencies will be at the center of this grid. When people disobey or criticize the system, their spending will be curtailed and access to basic aspects of society will be blocked. Again, this is happening already in China, which is a testing ground for the rest of the world. I beseech you to not allow this to happen. Protect us from this tyrannical overreach. End comment. The next comment is from James Roth of Rio Verde. Begin comment. I'm an Arizona voter and taxpayer and oppose the proposed Vision Zero plan because it is based on false premises that it will reduce traffic fatalities, which has been statistically proved it will not. It is based on a false calculation of ozone levels in Maricopa County. Even the Maricopa Association of Governments, MAG, the entity responsible for crafting an air quality plan for the region, has issued public statements acknowledging that the removal of our 4 million internal combustion engine ICE vehicles in the metropolitan Phoenix area would not bring Maricopa County into compliance with the ozone standards. Basically, this plan will increase the already congested roadways and is a veiled attempt to impose the unwanted ideology of the so-called Green New Deal on the citizens of Maricopa County. Please reject and oppose this ill-conceived plan. End comment. The next comment is from Patrick Hootman of Cave Creek. Begin comment. The BRT proposals for our metropolitan area are ludicrous. I could not come up with a better plan to strangle small businesses, increase traffic congestion, increase emergency response times, and do nothing about pollution if I tried. I have solar on my home and drive an electric car, so I'm doing my part to reduce pollution and support green energy. This regional plan that MAG is considering will do nothing but harm the average person who lives or works in the region and will not move the needle on ozone and other pollutants one bit. Drop this plan and encourage more telecommuting, more solar, more nuclear, and anything else that will not reduce our freedoms and standard of living like this BRT plan will. End comment. We had a comment and an addendum to the comment from Carol Phillips of Phoenix, Arizona. Begin comment. Please stop the road diets. We do not need to continue to have people not be able to use their cars and still get to work and around. Phoenix is too large for that. She had an addendum to her comment. Pass Senate Bill 1313. We need safe roads and to be responsible in implementing them. End comment. The last written comment comes from Martin Lynch of Tempe. Begin comment. We expect our government to protect our freedoms to drive our cars. Any person who does not serve the will of the people should resign. End comment. Mr. Chair, that concludes the public comments received prior to our new public comment process. Additional comments received since the changes took effect are at your place for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Our next item is approval of the consent agenda. Items 4A and 4B are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Okay, prior to the approval of the consent agenda, we do have members of the public who wish to comment on items. I have received one card on item 4B, Marissa Hamilton.
Hello, members. My name is Marissa Hamilton. I'm a resident of Phoenix. It's nice to see some familiar faces here. I had concerns about this consent item, primarily because I thought you should be aware of how the businesses are viewing your bus rapid transit project. I've been notifying the businesses along the corridors that you plan for bus rapid transit, and they are very concerned. As we saw with light rail in South Phoenix, this project resulted in many of our Hispanic core businesses completely going out of business. And it had to do with, one, because you're limiting the lanes, but also because these projects are 2 to 3 year construction projects. The same thing will happen with your bus rapid transit plan. We have in both of these corridors, in the Scottsdale area and in the Chandler area, we have some businesses that have been there for a very long time. When I've spoke to them, several dozens, I think over 100 now, many of them had concerns that they would not be able to sustain this project. They also didn't see a need for it, as their customers do not use public transportation. As we saw with the expense that we did with the light rail, it reduced the number of passenger riders in the area. So it actually didn't have a net sum game at all. And it also creates a significant amount of traffic congestion. So essentially the plan that you have in place is to kill small businesses that have been necessary for these areas in these corridors. We don't have a time frame. It would be nice if you could give the public a time frame when you have for what you have in mind for Scottsdale and Chandler. These plans are going to create more traffic congestion, which actually creates more pollution in the air. It's going to be, you're essentially helping the plan of trying to eliminate people with having their own personal car transportation, which Tucson has said is part of their climate action plan. And so the concerns are very significant. These businesses will not be able to sustain the plan that you have. You're creating instability for the region, which I think is the opposite of the purpose for you existing. Although, as I said yesterday, since you weren't here yesterday when I spoke, MAG was created in 1960 under a federal government program called coercive federalism. The reason why you exist today is actually to create hostile strings to override the transportation programs that we have in our local counties and cities. And although some of you here are elected representatives today, you indeed as a body don't have the consent of the governed. And so it is concerning for you to create such hostile transportation plans that will destroy our small businesses, especially with not having timelines, creating instability for our region. So I would encourage you to create a timeline, create some stability, and stop trying to override the will of the voters who you never got consent from. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, do we have any written comments for these items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did receive written comments regarding consent agenda item number 4B that were provided to the committee members in advance of the meeting and will also be reflected in the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 4A and 4B?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Osborne and Councilmember Stiff. Sorry. I was trying to remember whether you were vice mayor or council member. Because I think you were vice mayor, correct? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. We've also recently changed the way committee members online will vote. Based on feedback from member agencies, we will have those participating in the meeting online now take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, we will conduct a roll call vote. This will hopefully save time and maintain compliance with state law to accurately indicate how each member votes. For members participating online, please now turn on your cameras and unmute. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, when I call your name, please unmute and indicate how you vote. Mayor Wheatley, Tyler Pace.
Aye.
This
Thank-
is Mayor Wheatley. Aye. I'm gonna have to work on my camera here.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there anyone that I missed?
Ken Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. How do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, and any opposed, please
Jacob Butler,
vote nay.
you missed. No, you missed me.
Okay,
Dr. Clusen?
Aye.
Thank you.
okay, any opposed, vote nay. That motion passes. Okay, we will now move on to item number 5, the draft fiscal year 2024 arterial life cycle program. Item 5 on the agenda will be presented by Mark Overton, Transportation Planner 2. This item is to recommend approval of the draft fiscal year 2024 arterial life cycle program contingent on a finding of air quality conformity.
I guess it's good afternoon now, but good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Transportation Policy Committee. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Mark Overton. I'm new here at MAG, and I'm pleased to be here today to present the draft fiscal year 2024 ALCP for action. Next slide, please. So before we dive in, here's a quick overview of what we'll be getting into today. We'll give a brief summary of the ALCP. We'll dive into a bit of the ALCP update process and offer a snapshot of some project updates. And we'll end on some future programming notes before we can all get out of here. Next slide, please. So the Arterial Lifecycle Program is a financial management tool of the arterial street component of the Regional Transportation Plan and contains a list of arterial projects funded through Prop 400. Pursuant to the ALCP's policies and procedures, each year the ALCP is updated to make sure the program reimbursements and expenditures match up with program revenues. The update consists of updated revenue forecasts, changes to project schedules, modifications to project costs, and adjustments to program reimbursements. All of this is derived from a robust process where we here at MAG work hand in hand with members of our member agencies. Yeah, next slide. So as many of you know, the ALCP has funded many notable regional projects. To date, we've had about 97 projects or project segments constructed, with a few more nearing completion. Currently, we have about 58 projects or project segments underway, meaning that they're in their, at some point in their design, right of way, or construction phase. Next slide, please. So as previously mentioned, the LCP update includes regional area road fund and federal fund forecasts. The latest forecast released by the Arizona Department of Transportation indicated a 7% increase in regional area road funds over the prior year forecast. Additionally, the projection of federal formula funds into the program remains unchanged over prior year's forecast. Taking both these fund types in the aggregate, we have a net 4% increase in overall projected revenues for fiscal year 2024. Next slide, please. So now we'll get into a bit of the update process. In December of 2022, MAG distributed the ALCP project workbooks to each of our member agencies so they can update and verify their project schedules and costs. The information returned by each lead agency was used to generate the Transportation Improvement Program amendments. And among these amendments are proposed changes to 6 projects programmed in the ALCP. These projects are reviewed by the Street Committee in February and evaluated with the project change tool. In each case, the new project scored better than the older project. So once the workbooks were received, MAG staff work with member agencies for several months to match our program revenues and reimbursements so that they can align the project needs. I do want to take this opportunity to thank our member agencies for being super helpful and responsive throughout this update process. We literally could not have done this without you guys. Next slide, please. So looking ahead in fiscal year 2024, we have about 26 projects planned for or that are already in the enthralls of construction. This map of the region behind me highlights where these projects are located in teal. We look forward to all these projects having a fruitful fiscal year. Next slide, please. So before we get out of here, I want to leave you guys some key programming notes. First, I want to stress that MAG will continue discussions with lead agencies regarding realistic project delivery within the programming timeframe. I also want to acknowledge that the program in its current iteration is ending in December of 2025, and that date's coming up real quick. Along the same lines, I want to stress staying focused on project development, as many things can occur in the planning phases that can make the projects take longer than expected. We found that it takes an average about 4.5 years to complete a project, and that's only if local money is available. Because our program is based on reimbursements, local money is required upfront to kickstart any project. And finally, we will continue to work with and converse with our member agencies regarding how to manage a program as it enters its final years. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take.
Thank you, Mark. Do any committee members have questions or comments? for this
Chairman
item?
Sellers, if I might just make one clarification. It's important to note that MAG as an agency does not impose projects on cities, counties, or tribes. All these projects reflect things that have come from cities, from the counties, or from the tribes into a MAG process where they're evaluated for against each other for funding availability. But there are no projects where MAG has said, we're going to do that to your specific city. That is always within the purview of the elected bodies of the cities that make up the Maricopa Association of Governments. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation that Mark has given.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any questions, comments from committee members? Okay, prior to the approval of the recommendation, do we have members of the public who wish to comment on this agenda item? I have received one speaker card. Marissa Hamilton.
Members, my name is Marissa Hamilton. I'm a resident of Phoenix. I don't know your title, Ed, but thank you very much for those clarifying statements. I appreciate it. I have concerns again with the Prop 400. One in particular is the statements that came from MAG's allies on the Prop 400 legislative vote. While I support, repairing our roads, building more highways, I absolutely hate potholes, as most of you do. The Prop 400 that the legislature provided was actually to do road improvements while having the special hostel projects that I mentioned earlier to be on a separate line item. This was something that was going to allow the voters to make the decisions. So if MAG is a body that is not here to actually decide the transportation agenda for the region, then why would you oppose the voters actually making these decisions? With the documentation that was in the actual agenda, it's not identified what the improvements are. And so I think it would be nice to have that be a little bit more explicit. It would be great to have a little bit of a heads up to know where you're doing, where you're recommending road diets, where you're recommending limiting lanes, where you're recommending expanding lanes. These are things that the residents need to know. Again, you don't actually exist as a body that has the consent of the governed as you exist, although many of you are elected. And so if you're going to be influencing regional transportation decisions, you need to have more transparency and in what your plans are for the region. And so I would encourage you to be a little bit more explicit in what those improvements are so that as the public is evaluating what you're trying to impose on us, we can have more constructive public comments. I would also encourage your allies not to make comments by calling people like the public that you see here today fringe. That is what Mesa tweeted out against us, saying that the people that opposed that were supported the legislature's version of Prop 400 were fringe people. We are not fringe people. We are simply regular residents. We're moms, we're dads, grandparents, just regular citizens that care about our community and want to be able to have a transparent vote and let the voters decide ultimately. So MAG, you have a decision. You can either decide to truly stand by your mission of letting the voters decide as to how we are going to govern our roads, or you can continue to have insulting tweets come out from your allies. I would appreciate if you did the former. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did receive written comments regarding agenda item number 5 that were provided to the committee members in advance of the meeting and will also be reflected in the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to recommend approval of the draft fiscal year 2024 arterial life cycle program contingent on a finding of air quality conformity?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Stipp, a second from Vice Chair Worsborn. Members participating online, please turn on your cameras and unmute. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. Staff, can you take a roll call for members participating virtually who did not participate in the voice vote?
Vice Mayor Littlefield,
Aye.
thank you. Tyler Pace,
Aye.
thank you. Is there anyone that I missed?
Mayor Wheatley.
Thank
Aye.
you. Thank you, Mayor Wheatley. Is there anyone else that I missed?
Mayor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. We'll now proceed to item number 6. Item number 6 on the agenda will be presented by Gwen Castro, Transportation Engineer 3. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion.
Good afternoon, TPC. This item is a regional freeway program construction status update. Next slide, please. So an overview of my presentation. The Freeway Lifecycle Program is the management tool for the implementation of and highway projects funded through Prop 400. And this item represents an update on regional freeway projects funded through the program that are at or near construction completion. The projects are shown below. Next slide. And they're also shown here on a map. So the first is I-10 from State Route 85 to Verrado, I-17 from Peoria Avenue to Greenway Road, and State Route 303, the 43rd and 51st Avenue traffic interchanges. Next slide. So just to orient you where we are, the first project is I-10 from 85 to Verrado. On the left, you'll see a close-up of the limits of the project. Next slide, please. Here is a overview timeline of the project, starting with project development efforts in 2015, moving into a design concept report and environmental clearance. That work took place and was completed in late 2018, early 2019, with construction starting in July of 2021. Next slide, please. So this project, at the bottom here, you'll see a cross section of what the freeway looks like. In orange is the current project, which is a new general purpose lane in each direction, going from 2 to 3 lanes. And then the blue shown there is a planned HOV lane. This is also going to reconstruct the traffic interchanges at Miller and Watson Roads to a diverging diamond interchange. Next slide. So here are those 2 traffic interchanges that have been completed. On the left, you'll see an aerial of Miller Road, and on the right is Watson Road. Traffic is currently traveling on them. Next slide, please. Next project is on Loop 303, the 43rd and 51st Avenue traffic interchanges. So these are in northern area of the region, specifically near I-17 and Loop 303. Next slide. And again, with the timeline of the project, this is slightly different than the previous and a little bit shorter compressed timeline as it's a design build project. So the final design began in summer of 2021, which was just 2 years ago, and we are anticipated to be open to traffic with construction complete this summer. Next slide, please. This is from an economic analysis of Prop 400 projects showing the why that we need this project. You're looking at new traffic interchanges at 51st and 43rd and the TSMC site. So this is the Taiwanese semiconductor plant that is being under construction as we speak. Next slide, please. And so the project is going to construct those new traffic interchanges at 51st and 43rd Avenue, and it's going to extend Loop 303 through those new traffic interchanges. Again, expected to be completed this summer and is supporting development in the area, including TSMC. Next slide, please. These are some images courtesy of ADOT of the ongoing construction of the project. And in the background, you can see the construction with TSMC. So you have 3 contractors working in the area at the same time. On the right is a drainage box culvert that will go under the freeway itself. Next slide. So this project came so quickly and was in response to studies that were done showing a failing level of service at the I-17 and Loop 303 interchange as early as 2025. So that red in the bottom right-hand corner is a traffic backup and the failing movements that we're currently starting to experience. Next slide, please. The improvements that have been identified in the Prop 400 extension, again, in response to increased development in the area, are additional lane widening and the system interchange at Loop 303 and I-17. These are phase 1 projects in Prop 400 extension. Oh, thank you. Next project is I-17 from Peoria Avenue to Greenway Road. This is a drainage project. Next slide, please. So this project had its design completed in 2014 and construction began in early 2020. Next slide, please. This project was in response to the flooding that would happen on I-17 every time there was a severe weather events. Shown here on the screen are tweets and news articles, as well as images of the flooding that would happen at Greenway, at Peoria, and when the freeway would need to be shut down. Next slide. The project is constructing system improvements to the crossway drainage system along I-17, including a gravity drain system from Peoria to Greenway. An image on the right is showing what that gravity system looks like. So they take the water from the freeway itself, it goes into a series of basins and then a very large pipe underneath the freeway system that outputs into the Arizona Canal diversion. This is approximately, sorry, can you go back? Approximately 4 miles of large diameter pipe, and it will remove 4 existing pump stations. So construction completion is this summer as well. Next slide. These are images during construction, just to show you kind of the scale of what that looks like. On the right is a pipe that, I don't know if you can see it here, but there is a person standing at the bottom of that trench that could fully stand up straight with their arms raised in that pipe. That's how large it is. Next slide. So this item is on your agenda for information and discussion. I'm happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Quinn. Any comments, questions from the committee?
Yeah, Chair, just a couple. One is a huge thank you to MAG for the funding on the improvements on I-10 from State Route 85 to Verada Way. The project is nearly complete. I think there's just some little touch-ups at the very end. And what an incredible difference that makes in commuting. More to come. I know there's more improvements that are planned out that way, but not being stopped on the freeway coming home after a long commute from whether it's Phoenix or wherever for our residents, absolutely thrilled. And so a thank you. And a big thank you to ADOT and FNF who have performed outstanding on the project. We could always hope for that to go faster and maybe less backups during the construction. That's just construction. So I want to thank them. Also, just a quick comment on the Black Canyon improvements and the drainage. I remember that flooding when I was growing up. So about 10 years ago. Glad y'all caught that. But that has been an issue for a long, long time. So glad to see that improvements are being made there and commuters do not have to worry about that when it rains hard here. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I will just point out that one of the slides you showed about improvements on Loop 303 is dependent on the extension of Prop 400. Is that correct?
Correct. So the system interchange at 303 and I-17, the construction for that is contingent on the Prop 400 extension.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next item is legislative update. MAG Policy and Government Relations Director Nathan Pryor and MAG Transportation Funding Policy Program Manager John Bulin will give this report. I can't imagine you have anything to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. No shortage of activity around conversations, proposed legislation on the extension of the half-cent sales tax in Maricopa County for transportation. So backing up to the mid-May timeframe through early June, we did see our state legislature take a break, and that really provided an opportunity to continue negotiation conversations regarding legislative provisions that would allow for a ballot to come to the voters for the consideration of extending the hazardous sales tax for transportation in Maricopa County. Come in June timeframe, June 10th, we did see Governor Hobbs. She released a statement encouraging legislators to pass proposed legislation that contained negotiated provisions, including setting allocations at 40% for freeways, 22% for arterials, and 38% for transit, with elimination of flexibility between modes. Also seeing a set aside for 3.5% for the capital rehabilitation of the existing light rail system. Another provision was including proposed fare box language to provide statutorily prescribed benchmarks for fare box recovery consistent with our peers. Another provision, road diet language applying to arterial and freeway projects. And also namely among these provisions, including definitions for air quality and regional programs. So that was on June 10th. Fast forward 2 days later, we did see on June 12th, the legislature did reconvene. 2 days beyond that, on June 14th, the legislature did pass Senate Bill 1246 as amended, which we saw as containing numerous provisions that would not have allowed us to implement the originally adopted transportation plan. On that same day, June 14th, MAG did send a letter signed by Mayor Ken Weiss, our regional council chair, to Governor Hobbs, requesting her consideration of the veto of Senate Bill 1246. And in fact, yesterday on June 20th, Governor Hobbs did veto Senate Bill 1246. We're grateful to Governor Hobbs for her veto and for working with the region in support of legislation that will enable us to implement the regionally adopted transportation plan. We'd also like to thank our member agencies who voiced support to the governor for the veto. So looking ahead, the legislature is still in session. They plan to reconvene on July 31st, and we could quickly sine die quickly thereafter. So now between now and then, we'll continue our conversations with legislature, with governor's office. Of note, yesterday, the MAG Executive Committee did meet. That meeting included an e-session of legal counsel to map options and paths going forward. So more to come on this. Obviously, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot to discuss here. I'm going to pause there and open it up for any questions.
Questions or comments for Nathan?
Chair.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. You mentioned, so what I understand is the legislature and sort of this regional plan that was sort of adopted a couple of years ago before Governor Ducey vetoed it. How far apart are they on? It seems like the transit issue is the big bugaboo on this. How far apart are those?
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Stewart, members of the TPC, really, I think, we had a lot of productive conversations with the legislature throughout the session. There were several points where we got close. Unfortunately, I think really conversations broke down when, as we made progress on some of these issues, new issues were introduced. And so it became to a point where while we had gotten close on some of the bigger issues, with the introduction of new issues, it became sort of a moving goalpost. So certainly conversations were close. We are grateful. There's a number of members of the legislature that worked very hard to get this across the finish line. But unfortunately, conversations really broke down towards the end. So not terribly far apart, but there are several key issues that do represent a fairly significant distance.
Certainly. Thank you. A couple more follow-up questions, Chair, if you don't mind. So on the regional plan, if something were to change as it relates to Prop 400, which by the way, is extremely important as a Chandler resident and as a elected official in Chandler, we understand we have so many road projects that we need to get finished up, especially our I-10 interchange. And I know everybody on this panel is 100% behind those initiatives. Can the regional plan be amended if the Prop 400 language changes here at MAG?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, the plan can always be amended. That being said, there's a lengthy process to it. Obviously, this is a plan that gained consensus from 32 different agencies. Not a small feat, particularly when you're looking at the diversity of agencies that make up the MAG region and the diversity of transportation needs. A one-size solution doesn't fit all. So certainly there are opportunities to amend the plan, change the plan in the future. That being said, we went through a very lengthy evaluative process, leaned heavily on what MAG does best, and that's really technical analysis, data-driven efforts, as well as feedback from the public. And so it's important to take all those elements into consideration as we're looking forward.
Thank you. And then my last, so if I were a betting man in Vegas and working on the odds here of legislature and everyone getting together before, so we can get this on the ballot in 2024, what would you say the chances are of that happening in this session?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, it's hard to say. I will say this is a critically important issue. I think all of you recognize how important it is. Certainly members of the business industry understand how important it is. And so when you look at some of the data, the facts, the 32,000 jobs a year, the significant decrease in the cost of doing business, the significant advantages it provides our region from an economic development standpoint, and then all the quality of life factors, needing to make sure that people get to medical appointments, work, school. There are a lot of compelling reasons to drive this forward and a lot of reasons why this needs done. What the timing looks like, it's tough to say whenever you're talking, political discourse, politics, discussion. It's really hard to predict, but I think we need to continue to push the message of how important this tax is and really the role it's played in this region over the last 40 years. It is critically important. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Yeah. Vice Chair.
Just follow on questions that you hit a little bit about the makeup of the plan. And I think Mr. Zerker hit on MAG doesn't create the plan. It's projects that are pushed from the cities. Can you talk just a little bit about how that plan is created? I know we could stay here all day talking about all that, but just real high level, and then also the public engagement over the last, I think it's 2+ years that we've been working on creating this plan, the number of meetings, the number of comments related specifically to the plan.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC. So some of you were here and were partners in that plan development process. It was extremely lengthy. It was extremely detailed, took approximately 3 years to complete. Started with stakeholder engagement, public engagement on the front end. That was the theme that continued throughout. We had more than 400 different meetings where we came out, we spoke to folks, we got input, we put that back, received more than 15,000 comments in one way, shape, form, or another, leaned heavily on technical analysis and data. So it started with creating a universe of potential projects, programs, reaching out to our member agencies, having them submit priorities from their own communities, as well as looking back at 20 years worth of planning work that MAG did, went through a technical process, balanced, of course, with public feedback. And what that ultimately culminated in is unanimous approval from this body, Transportation Policy Committee, and the MAG Regional Council.
And an approval from the legislature last year.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Policy Committee, that is correct, with fairly significant voting margins. In fact, more than a majority, so to speak. And unfortunately, that was vetoed on July 6th.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Just wanted some perspective there.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mayor Giles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to underline that this has been a multi-year process. I think I was TPC chair 3 years ago. And so I still have a crystal clear recollection of the work that went into getting a unanimous vote from this body and then another unanimous vote from the regional council and all of the compromising that went into place. We are a large and diverse county, and what is a priority in one community is not what's a priority in another community. So this was a very difficult task to come up with a plan that got that unanimous approval. And I want to I want to give a compliment to this body and to MAG throughout this process at the legislature, the way that we have hung together, the way that we have in that same spirit of coming together and compromising to create this plan. We've defended it without reservation, and we've stuck together. And I just want to thank everybody for that. And also to answer Councilmember Stewart's question, I don't think there's a good chance that we're going to get something out of this legislature. This is the second year in a row that we've had our hearts broken, and I'm ready to just say I'm done with the legislature and expecting something to come out. So our fate is in our own hands, and so I think we need to rise to that challenge. If the legislature changes, if it proves me wrong, hallelujah. But I don't suspect they will. So I think, again, it's incumbent on all of us now to rise to this new challenge, look forward to getting this on the ballot through other means.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Miller.
Since the light rail portion seems to be the most controversial part, is it at all viable to separate it into two ballot measures?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, so we recognized that, certainly there were legislative concerns over the light rail issue. We worked hard with the legislature to try and address those concerns. In fact, we found ways that we would still be able to fully implement the plan and not allocate any sales tax funding towards extensions. Ultimately, that wasn't enough. We still needed funding for the capital rehabilitation of the light rail system to preserve that asset that the region's invested more than $2 billion in. And unfortunately, that became a sticking point with certain members of the legislature. That was too much of a pill to swallow. So we certainly worked very diligently to try and find areas of compromise to try and be able to move the plan together. But as I had mentioned, towards the end, there were just hurdles that we couldn't overcome and new issues raised by certain members of the legislature.
I'm not sure I heard the answer to my question in there. Is a separate ballot measure then simply not viable?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Policy Committee, when you look at transportation, it's a system. It's all integrated together. And so when you're talking about light rail, it's the buses that feed the light rail system. It's the street that they're operated on. This region has a history of an integrated transportation system over the last 40 years. If you were to bifurcate one component, that would risk that comprehensive system. It could also potentially jeopardize air quality conformity. And if we fail to meet air quality conformity, then we're talking about other impacts, economic impacts, where businesses couldn't build, expand, funding impacts where federal government might withhold transportation funding. It's important to note that federal transportation funding outside of Maricopa County is the #1 source for highway investments in the state of Arizona. It is hugely important for the state of Arizona. And so, from that perspective, no, we can't bifurcate them.
Thank you.
Mayor Wires.
Thank you. I don't know why everybody hates dead horses, but I guess I'm going to continue to beat this one. To answer the question that was asked about light rail, my city, Glendale, Arizona, we chose not to support light rail. It didn't work for my city. I didn't want to use my general funds to support it. Didn't make sense for our city. But 2 years ago, I chaired this particular committee, and we are the ones that got it to the governor. To my chagrin, he vetoed it. I certainly wasn't expecting that. But what I think people need to stop and understand that it's not one size fits all at all. Every city has different needs. Cities even have different tax structures. Some cities have their own transportation tax that we're charging in addition to what's already paid. And so for people to make accusations and imply that, we're all messed up or we're doing this wrong, every city's got particular needs that they're trying to address. When we had the agreement 2.5 years ago that all the cities basically all said, you know what, we can live with this. There wasn't very many cities that I can think of that weren't gagging at the same time they were swallowing. It wasn't something that we loved, but it was something that worked for every one of our cities individually. The current plan that just got vetoed, I'm happy it got vetoed. That was not working for my city at all. We don't have any freeways that we don't have any growth for new freeways. We weren't going to get the money that was available. The funding for our streets was being limited. So we were end up going to do even more what we're currently doing now. We pay in more taxes than we get back on our transportation. My city particularly does. With what would have been signed, we would have paid in a lot more and got a lot less. It didn't work for my citizens. I'm glad that she vetoed that bill. I'm very disappointed that our past governor Ducey, with all the work that he spent, all the years that he spent of building Arizona, bringing businesses to Arizona, didn't have the foresight to understand we need these freeways. We need all this transportation. We need the ability to move people around our valley in Maricopa County to work. If we can't do that, then none of this is worthwhile for any of us. So to answer your question, no, the light rail, you need that for the cities that need it. My city didn't need it, but we weren't using those funds anyway. In fact, we gave up, I think it was close to $70 million that we had saved or set aside in transportation tax for light rail. It didn't work for my city. It didn't make any sense. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments, questions?
Chairman Sellers, this is Ken Weiss.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
You know, the last year, the last 6 months have been a whirlwind of activity and effort and sweat, and in some cases, tears, especially over the last week. And while the optimist in me is still looking for a solution through the legislature, I will tell you that I echo the comments of Mayor Giles on looking for another way. We have said from the beginning that we want to put this to a vote of the public and let the public decide. And I've always been upfront and honest. And if the public decides that the MAG plan is the way to go, then we will celebrate on election night. And if the public decides that the MAG plan is not the way they want to go, then we will pick ourselves up off the ground and work on a new plan. But to have our efforts blocked at the legislature, and Mayor Wheatley and Mayor Giles and I were intimately aware of the negotiations that were happening. We were part of them. I think is unfair to the public. And I've been a longtime conservative, and I've always said we need to, the public should have a chance to vote on the plan. And it's a plan that took 4 years. It was 500 public meetings, over 10,000 people, tons of comments. And I think that going through the legislature, while we still keep hope open, and I used to have a VP of sales that would say hope is not a strategy, but it is hope, that I think we need to find a new direction to get our message to the people and let them decide on this plan in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Are there any requests from the membership for an item on a future agenda?
Chair Sellers.
Councilmember Stewart.
So appreciate the public addressing this council earlier today, and they brought up some questions that as my second meeting as a newbie here, and I think there's some other newbies here. There was some discussion about Vision 2050. There was discussion about Vision Zero. Is there a possibility of getting a briefing on that to this body about what those are, in light of trying to be as transparent as we can for a future item?
Mr. Zuercher.
Chairman Sellers, yes, of course. If the committee requests a briefing on items, we can absolutely do that. I'm just to understand, you're talking about some of the issues brought up about Vision Zero. There's other things listed.
In the 2050 Vision 2050. So I think it's as it relates to the overall transportation plan. There's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah.
So just if we can get just a 4 or 5 minutes sort of update on what those are as it relates to like BRs that have been coming up in my city, as relates to light rail and all those things. So I think the question at hand is that there's decisions being made and that have been made years before I got here, which are good decisions. Prop 400 in 2004 was a great decision as well. That's helped us sort of catapult our economy to where it is today. we don't want to stymie those things, but we certainly need to shed some light on some of the questions that our residents have. And so as elected officials, and Chandler and Jack can attest to, excuse me, Chairman Sellers can attest to this. If one of our residents asks for some information, we try to provide that for them. So if we could do that, that'd be great.
Okay, and I guess I will comment that this goes back to something you said earlier, and that is that a lot of these plans come from the municipalities. You know, lane diets or whatever is not something that is necessarily decided on at the MAG level. It's something that the municipalities decide on at their level and then say they want this included in the plan.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. We'll do our best to sort through this and kind of give a primer on what some of these transportation labels mean. Most of them don't really apply to MAG, as MAG does not have a Vision Zero policy. That would be something individual cities would adopt. But we can certainly kind of run through what those are.
Certainly.
To your request.
Thank you. And I think as it relates to how cities sort of all this comes together, and then you kind of help tie it all together, kind of an informational session about
We can talk
that
about the process.
would be super.
Really
It would help
just
me.
describe the process of how projects are solicited, vetted, and then brought forward for conversation. I think that's absolutely valuable because that actually has been some of the conversation we've had at the legislature, where there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how, particularly on the arterial side, street funding gets allocated. There was concern that the money was not allocated. What happens, and what we can describe it is, there's funding in 3 and 5 year increments where we request the cities to say, for example, what intersections need to be rebuilt with the arterial funds. We're not going to try and predict what intersection needs to be rebuilt in Chandler in 2043. But we can have Chandler tell us, and Glendale and Mesa and all those, what intersections need to be rebuilt between now and 2028. And we'll get those in. So we can do a description of that, absolutely, and kind of walk you through that process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And are there any comments or announcements from the membership?
Yes, I would like to make a comment. Kathy Littlefield from Scottsdale. I also would like to have a deeper dive into what is and what is not part of the MAG transportation plan as regarding to individual cities, road diets, all of that. Because I think, aside from the fact that our citizenry is up in arms about this, it also can reflect on the future of other projects through the MAG system because they're angry. And I think calming some of this and getting information out that's truthful would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other comments or announcements from the membership? Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, I get the opportunity now to talk you up. I'd like to recognize that this is Supervisor Jack Sellers' final meeting as chair of this committee. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank Supervisor Sellers for his service and leadership during these challenging times. That's an understatement, right? Among the many transportation advocates and champions in Arizona, the Honorable Jack Sellers stands very tall among them. Mr. Sellers turned retirement into a transportation-focused public service career. You left retirement to do this? Mr. Sellers has been a relentless transportation advocate for the betterment of the region, using almost any opportunity to impress upon his audience the importance of continued investment in transportation. After the unexpected veto of House Bill 2685 in July 2022, Supervisor Sellers, in his new role as chairman of the Transportation Policy Committee, immediately activated to find how the extension of Proposition 400 could get to voters as quickly as possible. He has since remained fully committed to the successful extension of Prop 400 for, in his own words, as long as it takes to get it done. He cares deeply about continuing investment in transportation infrastructure to ensure the next generation has the same opportunities to enjoy the quality of life made available to us today. The region is indebted to Mr. Sellers for his leadership, strength, and poise. Mr. Chairman, it's my honor to present you with a small gift from the Maricopa Association of Governments for your service. It's a bus pass for 24 hours only That's not true at all.
Can it be used on light rail?
You can use the light rail as well. Mr. Sellers, thank you for your service to MAG.
Okay, well, upon regional council approval next week, I will welcome Mayor Osborne as chair of this committee. I look forward to your leadership. I guess I will just make a couple of comments. I think all of you know by now that particularly with over $60 billion in announced expansion going on in this region, that my number one priority is still going to be critical infrastructure. I'm not going away. So any of you that hope that this would be the end of Jack have something else to think about. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing. It can be frustrating, but it's absolutely necessary, and I'm going to continue to do it. Okay, so this is the last meeting of this year. The next meeting of the Transportation Policy Committee will be on Wednesday, August 16th at 11:30 a.m. unless we need to meet in July. But if we meet in July, we will have Chairman Osborne. So this meeting is adjourned.